Hello, team. Welcome back to Process Podcast. I just wrapped up an episode with my good friend Karan, who at the end of 2024 made the decision to hike up to Everest Base Camp. Personally, I hadn't actually heard his encounter in the stories. I'd seen it on Instagram, so I was really eager to find out about his mindset before, during, and after the trek, and just to hear what the experience was like. An awesome conversation, and it's really inspired me to connect with my love for adventure and travel and being in wilderness. And I hope you guys enjoy it too. Karan Sanjeev, welcome to the Process Podcast.
Thank you, Ed. First one of the year, 2025. Let's go.
It is indeed. And hey, you've had a bit of an adventure.
Yes, I have.
At the start of 2025. Tell us, what were you up to?
You mean 2024? The end of 2024?
Start of 20. Technically, were you not climbing at 2025?
No. I was.
Okay, Karan, you had quite an adventure at the end of 2024. Would you like to tell us what it was all about?
Yes. So I did the Everest Base Camp trek, which was 12 days. I was away from the gym for 25 days. 5 days back home, Bangalore with my family and friends. And then 14 days away in Nepal. 12 of those days were trekking days. And then the first and 14th day being travel days. And then back home 5 days for New Year's Eve. And then 3-4 more days in the new year before I came back to Hong Kong.
Okay, so my first question is going to be, why did you do it? But before you dig into that, like on behalf of the team here at Coastal Fitness, I feel like you climbing Everest base camp, which is a pretty big deal. Like there's not many, okay, very, 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 very few summit Everest, and that is a huge thing. But even base camp, at least in my naive understanding of, like mountain trekking and endurance based activity, is like one of the pinnacles that I think a lot of people strive to achieve in a lifetime. And I didn't know that you were going to trek it until it was either just a message that suddenly came through the group that I'm going to be trekking base camp, or I saw something on your Instagram and I was like, what, when did this all happen?
Yeah.
And so just talk me through that.
Yeah, I think it was doing goal sharing for December. In the first Monday, I said survive Everest Base Camp trek in goal sharing. But no, I mean, this idea was first planted in my head from one of my best friends back in university. And he told me that he had done this when he was in high school or while he was in university break in one of the summers. He told me about it. And ever since then, it was in the back of my mind. It was there in my head. And
but what about in his storytelling? Yeah. When him telling you about his experience, what about that made it embed itself in your mind?
We used to go on hikes all the time. So in my first 4 years, basically in Hong Kong, which was my university days, we used to go on hikes almost every other week. And we've covered, I can't remember the names now, but we've covered all 4 trails. We've done most of the mountains or peaks in Hong Kong. And, so I used to enjoy adventurous activities and go on hikes all the time. I used to, yeah. That's before I joined Coastal. Yeah. And then I made, going to the gym my whole identity. And there are other reasons for that. But, and he did this, and this sort of like stuck with me. And I'm like, one day I'm going to end up doing that. Because we also did Mount Fuji together in 2017, which was my 3rd year in university. Yeah, I mean, since COVID, I hadn't traveled, as in I hadn't traveled for vacation or on a holiday or an adventure. I was either going home to see my family or last year, more predominantly, was a lot of travel for either the process, representing the company, or competing and representing the process as an athlete. So at the start of 2024, one of my goals was to travel on a holiday, and I definitely wanted to go on an adventure, solo adventure, and this was something that was the back of my mind. And I've seen these documentaries on Everest or the Alpinist, 14 Peaks, and yeah, I always preferred mountains to beaches. I'm more of that kind of guy. And I know, growing up, you're a naive kid, and I'm very delusional with my goal setting, and like I have these high goals with whatever it might be. And, growing up, I'm like, oh, maybe it would be cool one day to, summit Mount Everest. That was just a very naive dream. But for me, it was like, okay, now let's actually just go to base camp and just see what this is all about. And like, let's test the waters. And the last 3-4 months of 2024, is when I started actually thinking about Everest Base Camp as an option for the end of the year. And I knew I was saving up my annual leaves so I could take off the whole of December. In previous years, I was transitioning from a job into the coaching industry. I had to establish myself within the team in a new career. Getting myself out of financial hole. So I couldn't afford to do all of that. But now I'm like, okay, I can actually take off 3 weeks, and the team was covering me here with Meg and Mark. So I'm like, okay, this is the perfect time to do it. So it all came together. It was in the back of my mind for 3 to 4 months. I asked a couple of my friends from university who are similar in terms of like adventurous, sense of adventure, and it never came together. So, and I also was feeling a bit guilty.
You asked them to join you.
Yeah. And I was feeling a bit guilty as well. I didn't book this. I didn't book my flights. I didn't book the package for the base camp trek 4 days until I left to Nepal. So Tuesday I left.
That is classic.
Classic, I know.
You're saying it like you'd be surprised to hear. I'm not surprised at all.
But I need a visa. I needed a visa for Nepal. So I booked the trek package on Friday, booked my flights on Saturday, and I flew on Tuesday. But a part of me was because I was like, I want to spend time with my mom and dad a bit more. It would cut short my time with them with 4 or 5 days, and 4 or 5 days after. But then I'm like, I'm going to get bored at home. I have nothing to do, literally. My friends have their own lives now. So I'm like, I'm literally staying at home doing nothing. So I'm like, okay, this is the best time. Let's do it.
Okay. So I think most people... Okay, you firstly, just quickly describe, like, what is Everest Base Camp? Like, how many days are you trekking? What's the altitude? Yeah, what is just a very quick structure on what the actual trip is?
Okay, so first, for Everest Base Camp, you go out to Kathmandu, a city in Nepal. And then from Kathmandu, so I took a flight from Bangalore to Delhi in India, Delhi to Kathmandu. Then from Kathmandu, you go and you meet up with the agency that you booked your tour package with. And there are many agencies. I went with Ace the Himalaya. And then they have a brief the night before you fly out again. And then they give you, they talk to you about what to expect. Safety protocols, and then you have dinner, and then the next morning, you fly out from Kathmandu to Lukla. And that's typically where the Everest Base Camp trek starts, or not just Everest Base Camp trek. If you want to summit any mountain in the Nepal region of the Himalayas, that's where you start your journey. Some people actually, so Lukla is basically... Don't quote me on this. I'll get to the nearest 100 in terms of altitude. Kathmandu itself is 1,300, 1,500 meters in altitude. So it's already quite high above sea level. And Lukla is around 2,500, 2,700 meters. So it's already starting there. Some hardcore people that want to be like, oh, I started at sea level, or I started at like 1,000 something, whatever. They'll start lower down and hike to Lukla itself.
And how long's that hike?
I'm not sure. Should be maybe a day. Or 2, I want to say. Maybe a day. I want to say a day. But people start at Lukla. That's the common point. And Lukla is where the Hillary Tenzing airport is. So that's Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. So Hillary Norgay Airport, yeah. And that's where, if you saw my stories, we basically go off in this little jet plane from Kathmandu, and it's the shortest runway, and you're flying over the Himalayas, and you can see Everest from very afar, and you can see all the mountains as you fly over, and it's literally shortest runway, and you land there in the midst of mountains, and it starts from Lukla. And then from Lukla, you're basically going from settlement station to settlement station. From day to day, and that's the ascent. That's the beginning of the ascent. So really quickly, you go from Lukla to Namche Bazaar. Namche Bazaar is actually not a lie. You go from Lukla to Pakding in day.
Each of these places, are they like little villages? They're little towns. Are they just kind of like breaking points for the climb that previous climbers have set?
Yeah, I would say all of the above, but I wouldn't say breaking points for the climb. But it's people, it's mainly the local people, the Nepalese people that have settled there, but also the Sherpas. So Sherpas are people that have migrated from or moved from Tibet 500 years ago. And they're practicing Buddhists, and they have settlements there. Now I think the border is closed off for people to move from Tibet to Nepal. That's what I heard from one of the guides. But people have moved there, and that's where the settlements are. So it's a mixture of Tibetan people, Sherpas, and local Nepalese people as well. And yeah, so these are settlement stations, and these are also rest stations for trekkers and hikers, and that's basically the major source of tourism or revenue for the people here.
I was going to ask, what brings these towns and settlements there? So is it really just to cater to the tourists that are coming up and trekking Everest? If the tourists weren't there, would these settlements and these people live on the mountain still?
Great question. So I went during the off season. Right, so December is actually the off season.
What makes it off season? Like it's just colder, or
yeah, it's colder. So it's off season because you're not gonna find anyone trying to summit Everest during this time. I think there's one guy trying to break a record and try to summit Everest in December
because it's just too cold.
It's too cold. It's harsher conditions. It's less likelihood of summiting Everest. So when we reached base camp, which we'll get to, is there were no actual tents. There was no one actually at the base camp, right. Because no one summits or no one tries to summit Everest during this time. You want to maximize your success, maximize your chances of success of summiting Everest, right? So that's off season. Why are we talking about off season?
So I was asking like why the settlements are there.
Oh, good question. So now when we went during the off season, a lot of the tea houses, they're called, the tea houses is where you stay overnight, and that's where they get a lot of their business from. They were closed, and those people have closed, and they've gone back to their, let's say, Kathmandu or lower down in altitude to Lukla or wherever their family is, and then during the on season, they come back and they open up shop again. But there are still some tea houses that are open during the off season, of course. And then, of course, there are bars up there as well. Whatever you could possibly think of. It's quite, people live there.
Cool.
People live their regular lives there as well. There's schools there. So a lot of Nepali kids and Tibetan kids that go to school there as well. So
So this hike, how many days does it take to reach base camp?
I mean, so the itinerary was 12 days, right? 12 days, which includes the ascent.
And every day you're walking?
Yes. Includes the ascent, 2 acclimatization days, and the descent. But
on the acclimatization day, so this is where you're adjusting to altitude.
Exactly.
Is there no walking on that day? Are you just staying put?
There is walking. So there are 2 acclimatization days. One's at Namche Bazaar. So you go from Lukla to Pakting, day 1, yeah. And then day 2 you go Pakting to Namche Bazaar, and then you stay day 3 in Namche Bazaar, and then Namche Bazaar to Tengboche to Dingboche. Dingboche, you stay there for another day, and then you go Dingboche to what's the name? I'm forgetting the name.
Yeah.
And then you go to...
I'm very impressed with the other names so far.
Yeah, Dingboche to... I should know this name. That's where we saw the sunset of Nuptse. But anyway, from there you go to Gorakshep, and then Gorakshep you go to Everest Base Camp, and then you go to Kala Pathar, and then you start coming back down, right? But the 2 acclimatization days happen at Namche Bazaar and Dingboche. And those are at 3,400 roughly meters for Namche Bazaar and 4,500-ish for Dingboche.
And what are you doing on what are you supposed to do on an acclimatization day?
It's just for your body to get used to that altitude. And on that day, we actually go trek up a nearby mountain or hill, and we go up slightly to where we're going to go to the next day and sleep. You do not want to spend the entire 24 hours at the 4,000 level up or 5,000 level up.
So you're giving yourself like a micro dose of
Yes, exactly. Right. So you go up and you enjoy the view. So on the Namche Bazaar acclimatization day, we went to the Everest Hotel view, and that's where we could see proper view of Everest and Lhotse, Nuptse, all the surrounding 8,000 meter or close peaks, plus peaks. So that's acclimatization day. So talking about the itinerary, I did one of the acclimatization days, and I ended up choosing not to do the second one.
Just felt like you didn't need it, or?
No, so if you know, I ended up, it was supposed to be only me and my guide and my porter. But then ended up happening that a couple from the UK who live in Dubai now, they're teachers in Dubai, they also had the same itinerary as me, Everest Base Camp, plus a peak. The station that I forgot earlier was Labouche. And they were going to summit Labouche Peak. So they did Everest Base Camp trek last year as well. And this year they're doing the exact same thing, plus Kala Pathar, because they couldn't do it last year because of altitude sickness, and also because they tried to do it during sunrise, we didn't do that. We did it during sunset this time. I can get into that later. And they were going to do a peak summit of Labouche Peak. Because why are they doing that, right? Everest Base Camp is about 5,364 or 364 meters high, and Le Boucher Peak is 6,100 something. So they wanted that next challenge, and they're well traveled. They've done Mount Kilimanjaro, and that's about 5,900, and they wanted to do a 6,000 plus meter peak. And honestly, like getting to Everest Base Camp and Kala Patthar, it's not technical. You just have to climb up and down mountains. Yes, it's like rigorous in terms of like you have to trek 5 to 6 hours on most days.
And it's mainly you on steps. Is it like you scrambling up slopes? Is it?
There are a lot of periods of time where it's like an uphill slope and you're climbing up and down, but they're quite well made, paths. So it's not. Yeah, I mean, if you've hiked in Hong Kong, I honestly believe like you'll be fine at Everest Base Camp. It's just hard on the joints for sure, because they say in the itinerary it's about 6 hours of trekking a day, but we were like going at speed, and we ended up maybe 4 hours a day, 5 hours at max. You'd say usually you take off at 8 a.m. In the morning, and you'd go about for maybe 2-3 hours in the morning. You stop for lunch, you have lunch, and then you start off again 2-3 hours, and then you reach your next settlement station for the evening. And you want to be starting just an hour before it starts to get warm, and then you want to be reaching before it starts to get cold again. So I'd say about 8 to 3 or like 8 to 4 is like when you're trekking. And I say 4 to 5 hours of trekking, but we're actually moving for like 5 to 6 hours, but we're stopping so much for photos and like whatever it might be, or a lunch break. So active moving time, I'd say 4 to 5 hours.
How many steps are we talking? I know you would have tracked your steps on a daily basis.
So I'm not going to include the last ascent day and the first descent day, because we did a lot more. So on average, on the first 4-5 ascent days and the last descent day, so most days it was 25,000 steps.
And it's all uphill, basically.
No, it's uphill, downhill. It goes and you go up and down valleys and mountains and through the ridges across the river. So it's up and down. So it's not just up. It's up and down.
So you ended up reaching base camp at 9 days. No, it was meant to be 12 days. No, 12 days is including the ascent and the descent.
Correct.
So you got there quicker because you basically took out one of the acclimatization days. Yeah. Do you need to? Is there any acclimatization needs to happen on the way down as well?
No.
Just on the way up.
Just on the way up. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So that's quite a lot of walking.
Yeah.
And I know you're a fit guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, you train 1 to 2 times a day, primarily in a gym. Sometimes you go running. You've done a mini triathlon, and a couple of high roxes, but none of that marries up to the fact that this is 9 days plus of continual walking. And so the question I wanted to get at was, you didn't really prepare for this at all. I mean, you prepared in the sense that you were just generally fit, but you're never really working in excess of an hour. Yeah. You definitely weren't, on your feet for 5 continuous hours of moving, and you definitely weren't doing that back-to-back days. So I feel like most people who set a goal of hitting base camp or climbing, some of the other big mountains in the world, there is a preparation period that people go through. And that preparation period is to, number one, ensure that they can actually achieve the goal, climbing up and the descent, because I think people forget the descent. But also it's about, minimizing risk of injuries and setbacks and things that might happen in the wake of finishing something like that. Why didn't you do any of that?
I know my best friend that did it. And I know at the time he was fitter than me, but I trust my fitness, and I honestly believe that, I don't know, I say this but Ant takes a piss, but I believe a lot of people, or most people that train on a regular basis 3 to 6 times a week can do base camp, and which is why I believe anyone that comes here to this gym, to Coastal, can do base camp, because I saw people way less conditioned doing base camp. I met a mother from the same town as me, from Bangalore, who was 50 years old, who got to base camp. It's just that it's going to be a lot more painful for you. That's it.
I think what I think about though is not back in my fitness.
Yeah.
But it's more just, it's the specific adaptations. In these adaptations aren't so much like fitness-based adaptations, but it's more like, you know, like when you do lots of chest to bars, you get calluses in your hands, and the more calluses you have, the less likelihood you're going to tear when you do a set of chest to bars. When you haven't done chest to bars in 6 months, you jump up, you tear. So it's things like that I'm thinking about, like blisters on your feet, breaking in shoes, you know, just constant impact on like ankles, hips, and knees. It's those things that I would probably be more wary of, because at the end of the day, if those things get, you know, if those light up or you pick up issues there's not fitness that's holding you back, but it could just be like, I don't know, bleeding or an adhesion or savage chafing or, you know, fill in the blank. Those are the things that I think those are the justifications for why I think I would prepare. But I don't know, did that cross your mind at all? You're like, nah, I'll be fine.
No, I mean, I think obviously there's a bit of, you know, backing myself and a bit of, I guess, naivety of like, it'll work out, everything will be fine. Like I literally went and bought my gear the day before I flew out. I went to Decathlon with my mom and I went and bought everything that I needed. I didn't even break in my shoes because I didn't buy shoes. I borrowed a pair of shoes from my friend. So yeah, I had minimal preparation when it came to, I guess, gear, or, you know, I just relied on my baseline fitness.
I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode with a quick shout out to our sponsors, Today Well Spent. I've been using this journal for 2 years and it has made a massive impact on my physical, but mostly my mental well-being. It is a guided journal backed by neuro and behavioral science, which I actually didn't know at the time. It has questions for you to answer at the start of the day, at the end of the day, end of every week, end of every month. And it's brought so much self-awareness to me of the things that positively and negatively impact my life. So if you're someone who cares about your physical and your mental well-being, which I think you do because you listen to this podcast, then go and grab yourself a Today Well Spent. Use the discount code THEPROCESS, one word in capitals, to get your discount.
But like you said, like you had to think about the descent as well. A lot of people actually take the helicopter back from base camp. So the family that I met that were from my hometown, they got to base camp and they took the helicopter back down all the way to Lukla and then out to Kathmandu. But in December, just after we finished our trek, I think they've banned commercial helicopters now.
Reason being?
I think it's still an ongoing thing. Reason being, it's very commercialized, and they don't, unless it's for safety or trying to get someone back if they're, you know, injured or their life's at risk. They do not want to get people, because a lot of people, if they have the money and the resources, they'll just literally take a helicopter out to base camp just to see base camp and say they've done base camp. So there's always that option of like taking the helicopter back. But I think when it comes to things to consider, I don't think fitness is something that, you know, you or I or most people that train regularly should need to consider as high as you think. I think it's more things like altitude, because a lot of people, I think, can get symptoms of altitude sickness. And then the brief that we got from the guides, you know, was quite clear. I started taking Diamox, which is an altitude sickness pill, from day 0, right in Kathmandu. Half a tablet after breakfast, half a tablet after dinner. So 1 tablet a day. And then they told us what the symptoms are of altitude sickness, like losing appetite, losing sleep, shortness of breath as you get higher and higher, headache, muscle fatigue, all of these things, right? And I did not, you know, touch wood. I'm very grateful that my body, my mind, and my fitness held up. I did not experience any of this. And we're doing like blood oxygen tests every night. I had my Whoop as well, which gives me my blood oxygen levels. And they have this device that they put on your finger and they test your blood oxygen levels. And mine was above 90%, all the way up until we got to 5,000 or 4,500 meters. And then 4,500 meters plus, it dipped to like 86%. And then at 5,000 meters plus, it dipped to 83%, which was still very high. Like the minimum that they need for like safety is like 60-65%. So I was quite high. And you know, they tell you, my guide even warned me, like, you know, are you sure you want to skip the acclimatization day? Because the couple had to skip it because there was going to snow and their chance of submitting Labouche Peak was going to be less likely. if they didn't skip it and move ahead of their itinerary. And I didn't want to reach base camp and Kala Patthar by myself. I'd rather much be with them because I enjoyed their company. You know, it's good banter, good chat. I got to know them very well. Very nice people. So I'm like, would I want to reach base camp on Christmas Day by myself, which was the plan? Or would I want to reach base camp with these, you know, with my new friends who I'm still in touch with? So it was no brainer for me. And my guide was very honest and said that, you know, they've done Kilimanjaro, they've done Everest Base Camp last year. They have been at these altitudes, you haven't. So I'm all for it because the guide for the couple and my guide, they're best friends. They're like, I would want to be with him as well, you know, but if you're for it, I'm okay with it too. So obviously there's a bit of like hesitation in my mind. I'm like, what's going to happen? So the next day when I was supposed to be at that acclimatization day and we started going up higher, initially it was my mind playing tricks. My mind playing tricks on me. I'm like, oh my God, I can't breathe. But it was actually because of the buffer that I was wearing, and the buffer is quite thick, so I couldn't get enough air in. And after 20 minutes of trekking up, I'm like, I can't breathe. I'm losing breath, and I started panicking a little bit in my mind.
Did you share that with anyone, or did you keep it to yourself?
I kept it to myself, and then I stopped for a while and put my buffer down, and then I'm like, okay, I can breathe again. And once I felt fine, I told them this is how I felt. And I think I got in my own head. But the cool thing is the guide tells you what you're going to experience and what you're going to feel. And then you know, okay, it's happening. This is what's meant to happen. And you just got to calm yourself. And that happened. And that's also because the hardest part of the trek is the first 15, 20 minutes after breakfast when you first start your morning ascent or morning trek, and the first 15, 20 minutes after your lunch. Because you're just going to warm up.
Yeah.
Literally. And I was literally thinking about why warm up is so important while I was doing it. Because 15, 20 minutes. And then once my body got warm, I was like, oh, I'm good.
I'm now thinking, one of my questions coming up is going to be, what have you learned from Everest Base Camp that you brought into everyday life? I'm trying to think about your training for the last 3 days and if you have actually warmed up. Would you say that you have?
No, I haven't.
Okay, good. Okay, so a question I'm interested in is expectation versus reality.
Yeah.
I think if you were to ask me, like, what would I expect in an Everest Base Camp climb? Because I have done no research, super naive, I have no idea what to expect. Obviously, you did some research. I'm sure you didn't do as much as most people do who are going to take on that challenge. But did your expectations match your reality? Or what were the biggest surprises?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my biggest like takeaways from the whole experience. And I made a post about it, talking about how in my head, I'd built up Everest Base Camp as this whole pinnacle of the entire adventure, or when we reach there, it's going to look like this, be like this. And you've seen these movies, you know, like Everest or whatever it might be, and you have this image in your head. So when I got to Everest Base Camp, it's pretty cool. I mean, you know, you get there, you can see Everest. You know, Everest is always covered with clouds compared to the other mountains, just because of that part of it. The other side of Everest, you can access Everest not just to Nepal but also to Tibet. So because of the winds there, the clouds are always over Everest, and the other mountains on this side there are no clouds. So it's pretty cool to see like Everest just covered in clouds.
Mysterious.
Yeah. So that was pretty. You know, that view is pretty cool. And then honestly, my favorite mountain was Nuptse. Just the ridges and the beauty of it. And that you can see that right next to Everest the entire time. So looking at that from Everest Base Camp was pretty cool. But it was quite underwhelming in the sense that when we got there, obviously there was no tents pitched up because it's the off season. And it was also because a lot of the Khumbu glaciers have been melted away. And a lot of the parts have changed. And we went to a museum on the way up on one of the days, and you can see the Khumbu glaciers and the entire landscape so much different 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago compared to what it is now. And you can see how real global warming is. And even when we were trekking up, a lot of because of natural disasters like earthquakes and flooding, because of the Khumbu glaciers melting that seep into the Dudh Koshi River, you can see a lot of the path was eroded, and that we had to go off the path, and that a little bit steeper path up, which was not part of the natural path. So yeah, it was quite, underwhelming.
Is that because you seen the videos and the pictures, and you had these ideas of what basically looking for these kind of like key I guess, yeah, like viewpoints or
Yeah.
images, and then because you didn't see that felt underwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And also because like the rock, it's just basically when you get Everest Base Camp, the the sign that you made it is that there's a big rock with Everest Base Camp spray painted on it with 5364 meters there, and someone apparently recently in the last few weeks had it's getting
That
put
red spray paint.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw that in your photo. I was
That's
like, that doesn't look great.
that's the thing. Like that's like you've done it.
Wow.
If you get a picture there, you've done Everest Base Camp.
But what was a red thing?
So that's Everest Base Camp.
Okay,
Someone has crossed out Everest, and so we're getting political here. We won't get too much into it, but they put the Chinese name of the mountain. So Everest actually has 3 names. It has Everest, which is known worldwide. It has Sagarmatha, which is known in Nepal, and it has a Tibetan or Chinese name. I don't want to try pronouncing it, and that was spray painted across it.
Got it. So there's an ongoing battle.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was like, people quite disappointed. I had some 2-3 random comments on my post from people that I don't know that commented stuff about it, like who has done this. It became quite political. So overall, that was quite underwhelming. But I mean, not to take away from the fact that the view of the Khumbu glaciers, the mountains, Everest, and the surrounding mountains is still unbelievable.
So okay, can I ask about this like underwhelming feeling?
Yeah.
So is it that is the expectation versus reality is that you thought you would have this like awe-inspiring moment when you reached base camp?
Yeah.
Because of the view being one of those things, and because it wasn't there, it didn't feel as.
Yeah.
Is that the feeling?
Yeah, I would say the view, and also I thought that it would be a lot harder to reach Everest Base Camp. When I reached Everest Base Camp, I did not feel any physical or fitness fatigue from it.
And did that feel disappointing?
Yeah, a little bit. The view, because you get such stunning views all the way up on the way up. So which is why I said one of my posts was like, the journey is more important than the destination. So the entire 5-6 days of the ascent, we literally took, on the 7th day, we reached Everest Base Camp. So 6 days of ascent, and every turn, in most turns, there's such beautiful views of mountains, whether it be Everest, Nuptse, or Amadablam, any of the mountains, such beautiful views. Some of the pictures that I have are actually quite better than from the views at Everest Base Camp, if I'm being honest. So like that reminded me, my biggest takeaway was, because at Everest Base Camp, we literally spent 30 to 45 minutes. That's it.
You were like, done.
Took pictures. I got a cool sick handstand walk video at base camp with Everest in the background, and then we made our way back down. But it was 6.5 days of ascent to get there, and there were much cooler views and physical turmoil. Is
this in hindsight, thinking back now? You're like, actually, the views on the journey were better than the thing. But so can I ask, when you were looking at these views on the way up, and you were stopping at these different checkpoints and taking it in for a second, was in the back of your mind, this is cool, but I can't wait to get to base camp?
Yeah.
It was like you were immediately downplaying what you were seeing because you had this bigger pinnacle that you're about to see later. Was that something that's playing in your mind?
Actually, no. I mean, every time we stopped, I wanted to soak every view in and take pictures everywhere. I knew I was going to come back down a similar, if not the same route. Only a certain part we changed on the descent. So in my mind, I'm like, you know what? I can actually take pictures on the way back, but I didn't do that. I made sure I took everything in on the way up. So I wasn't thinking about, it's only going to get better from here. I just made sure to enjoy taking everything on the way up as well. But like I said, it is in hindsight. And it is upon reflection that I know that, even we'll talk about it, the tattoo I have is not off Everest Base Camp or Everest itself. It's got to do a lot more with the journey and certain other areas on the trek up, the views and even the physical turmoil of it.
So this whole idea of the journey and not the outcome, which is really why we're called the process. We talk about it all the time, right? It's about the process, not the destination. Was that an alarming rude awakening, or was it a reminder of something you already previously believed in? And is it changing your perspective of life now, coming back?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's an awakening or like something new. I think it's a good reminder. I mean, just the fact that I changed my career from the corporate world, being software developer and finance, to now being in the fitness industry, being a coach at Coastal in the process, that was because of me wanting to enjoy what I do, and enjoying the journey versus just the destination. I mean, don't get me wrong, the destination is important. You need to have like a target,
guiding
exactly,
North Star. Yeah,
exactly. But you got to enjoy that journey, because once you get to the destination, it's just so short lived, that you're gonna move on to the next thing, move on to the next big thing. So it's a good reminder, but it's also made me realize that I think maybe sometimes I get too carried away in the smaller things in life, and like just the routine and monotony of life, and I let like small things, whether that be at work, in relationships, with money, or whatever it might be, get to me. And then I just, the whole 12 days in the mountains made me realize how simple life is and what truly matters. And
so what does truly matter?
I think one thing is relationships with people. Money is important. I do have financial goals, but just to sustain a certain kind of lifestyle that I want to live for the rest of my life. But more than that, I think, I keep going back to not just the process's, mission, but just positively impacting people and building relationships and living by my principles and values and holding true to that, whatever that might be. So I think, I'd say like staying true to my character, and knowing that one day we're all gonna, pass away or like leave Earth, and making sure that I enjoy my time here. Not just selfishly like going on adventures and making the most of what the world has to offer, but also making sure that you're leaving something positive behind and making a difference in other people's lives. Yeah.
You're a guy that struggles with silence.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, I walked into the changing room the other day and I'm about to get in the shower and I'm like, who is playing music in the shower? And of course it was Karan. I was like, how is your phone even in there? And I think you figured out a way to plonk your phone so it stays dry, that you can still listen to some ridiculous house EDM when you're having a shower.
Nah, it's Google Dolls.
Okay, we're going to pretend it's EDM. It's a better story. But generally speaking, you like loud music. You're always plugged in. I think the idea of like silence and solitude and not doing anything has previously been quite an uncomfortable thing for you. So I'm curious to know, did the mountains and this expedition change that at all? Or were you plugged in and listening to Google Dolls from day one?
So on the Ascent, there was literally no music, because I was with the couple. So we were always chatting. I was getting to know them. They were getting to know me. So I always had company. And of course, you're like, during the uphills, when we're not a talkative bunch, we were quiet. So we were just hearing our breathing and you were in your own thoughts. So it definitely gave me a lot of time to think about a lot of things, not just about the experience I'm going through and me being in the mountains, and just a lot of gratitude as well, a lot of positive emotions, but just also work through whatever that is I might have, looking back at 2024 or whatever I'm going through in life currently, thinking about 2025, thinking about life, it gave me a lot of time to like reflect and plan ahead as well. On the way down, I'm not going to lie, I had one headphone in my ear and we were sprinting down the mountains. I made it fun. I had good tunes in my ears and we were like literally running down. And there's supposed to be three to 4 days of a descent. We did it in 2 days, which was quite fun.
Okay, so was that quiet? Was that silence uncomfortable for you? And has it changed your relationship with silence and being alone with your thoughts?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I mean, I want to say, so I'm an only child, right? So I've always, obviously growing up, I had a lot of friends, obviously as you grow older, your friend circle shrinks, it's quality more than quantity. But I've always had music playing in the background as just white noise, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not with my thoughts. It actually helps me think. It depends on the music as well. It depends on what I'm doing. And when I get into like alt rock or like more like Goo Goo Dolls vibes, it's just there in the background. It actually helps me work through my thoughts and feelings. So it's not to say that I'm just like zoning myself out or distracting myself with music, it actually helps me process things a lot better. Has it changed? No, I mean, when I go home, there's always music playing. Most of the time.
Music.
Most of the time, yeah. Same music.
Any other like changes, life lessons, epiphanies from this trip?
Yes. Make sure to go on more adventures. It had been a while since I've gone on an adventure. And I do have some obnoxious like goals now.
Would you like to share?
Of course, yeah. So the next step is I want to summit 6,000, 7,000 meter peaks. And they're the more technical climbs.
Is that what this couple were doing?
Yes.
Would you do that?
Yes. So that's, I don't know if I'll do the Boucher peak, but I want to summit 6,000 meters, 7,000 plus meter peaks next. And when I say technical climbs, I mean like, rope and harnessing yourself to a rope, using an ice pick, using your ice cleats to, dig your feet into the ice, and almost vertical climbs. And that, I think, would be a proper physical challenge for me. I think that's the next step, because eventually in the next 10, 15 years, I now have this goal of like wanting to try to attempt to summit Everest. I think that would be a pretty cool story. And I saw the numbers, and
yeah, what is the percentage of people who attempt to summit who actually
so
summit?
only 7,900 people in the history of humanity have summited Everest.
Wow. That seems so low.
Yeah.
It seems so low when you see the photos of like the lineups at Everest of people trying to summit, when it just gets backlogged. That's crazy. It's only that little.
Yeah, and a few other like numbers that I saw is 77% of people that attempt to summit Everest are successful. So 3 out of 4 people are successful in their attempts that even start. And then now the death rate is just 1 in 100. Those are very good odds.
Decent
compared
odds.
to, I know, compared to like 20, 30 years ago or 10 years ago. I don't know, it would be like 1 in 8, 1 in 10, I want to say.
Yep.
And that's quite low. And then, of course, the next thing is the money. It's expensive.
It's expensive, yeah.
Like it's on average, from what I've seen on like just a YouTube search, Google search, is like 50,000 USD. So anywhere from 40,000 to 60,000. Because it's like, it's and like time, in terms of time, it's like at least 2 months. I would say a month to 2 months. Yeah, a month to 2 months. I want to say 6 weeks to 8 weeks.
There's no choppering off the top of Everest, is there?
Not off the top of Everest, but from my very little understanding of like movies and like just very quick Google search, depends on the air, depends on the weather, of course. Weather is always changing in the mountains. You can't take it for granted. But the helicopters can land at camps. So after base camp at 5364. All the way to Everest, which is 8,848 meters, there's 4 more camps. You have Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4. And Camp 4 is just below the death zone, which is 8,000 meters. So you can, I guess, get chopped off from there.
Love it.
Yeah.
For people who are thinking that maybe this is something that they would like to do, like, have you got any words of wisdom or advice for people thinking about doing base camp?
I guess the biggest thing is if you have a general baseline fitness, if you go to the gym, you do like regular strength and conditioning, I think fitness wise you should be fine. It's more to do with just preparing yourself better with like, honestly, I think in terms of like my gear, I had everything that I needed. I wore 4 to 5 layers on my top half, and I wore 2 to 3 layers on my bottom half. So having the right gear definitely helps. It'll keep you warm. And the agency will give you a list literally of everything you need to have. So you're well prepared. And then just making sure that you're eating. They tell you, eat. I had no problem eating, although I lost 4 kgs because I had almost zero protein. I'm not joking when I say that.
And is that just because no one is it not part of the local culture to eat protein? Is it primarily a plant-based diet, or?
So they do have meat there. It's just that my guys advised me not to order meat as we started getting higher and higher because of the fact that the Sherpas, or people that have migrated from Tibet 500 years ago and continue to live there, they are practicing Buddhists and they believe in ahimsa, and they do not kill animals themselves. So just the way the meat is sourced and prepared, sourced in the sense the way it might have the animal might have been killed.
Right.
You know, you don't want to offend them, and also with this way it's prepared in the sense that I guess me being an Indian, I guess I haven't lived in India for 10 years, but I don't think that would have been a problem. I could have had it, and I think my gut would have, or my immune system would have held up. But it was more of a thing of respect of like, no one was ordering meat. I didn't want to be the guy that ordered meat while I was up there. So I went almost 10, 12 days without any protein, maybe 5-10 grams from Snickers bars.
Did that tempt you to stick with a plant-based diet coming back?
No. I've gone vegan in the past for 6 months, 6 to 9 months, but yeah, that's a different story. So making sure you're eating. I had a lot of carbs the entire time, a lot of rice, potatoes, momos, noodles, a lot of carbs. I ate like double servings. Drinking enough water. That was a problem for me because it's so cold and you just do not want to drink. Sometimes the water freezes over as well. You just don't want to drink water. So they recommend 3 liters plus. I was barely having 1.5 liters of water. So that was, but luckily that didn't affect my cramping. I didn't have any issues with cramping. And then the main thing is altitude sickness. So if you can, make sure you can do this at your own pace, right? They have an itinerary of 12 days. You can extend it as well. So if you like give leeway to your travels where you don't, I literally flew out the next day, back home. So if you just leave that open, the Sherpas, the guides, they're very flexible. If you need to stay at a station for longer, if you need to take longer time to make the next station, you can take it at your own pace. And if altitude sickness gets to you, then you just make your way back down and you try another time. But that's, I guess, altitude sickness is the main thing. Cold, if you're properly prepared, I think you'll be fine in terms of like clothing, but the air does get thin. And that did affect me in the night. Cause I'm claustrophobic. And I woke up 2 nights where I wouldn't say bad sleep because I still got 6-7 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep compared to like the other nights I got 8 hours of sleep. But I woke up almost every hour because the air was so thin and I felt like I was choking. But we're briefed about this, that this might happen. So it's just about, calming myself and going back to bed. And I'm also wearing 4 or 5 layers. So it felt claustrophobic. It felt like I couldn't breathe, but just knowing that this is normal and like going back to bed. And some people hardly get an hour of sleep and they have like splitting headaches, or their hands or their joints or their eyes might start puffing up. They might have migraines, and you just need to have the right tablets or do the right protocols. If that does happen, I was just lucky enough to, that my body, my mind held up. The only time I questioned why I'm doing this was on Christmas Eve. We finished base camp. We came back to Gorakshep, and then we're going to go to Kalapathar from 5,364 at base camp to 5,644 at Kalapathar to watch sunset over Everest and Nuptse. And the final 10-20 minutes of the ascent was the only time I questioned, why am I doing this? Because just before I started...
This is after you'd already reached base camp.
So you do that, and then you come back down and you go up a different route to go to Kalapathar to see the sunset over Nuptse and Everest. And the last 20 minutes of the ascent, I questioned why I was doing this, because just before we started that, I was on Instagram and I was seeing everyone's stories and they're all spending time with their family and friends. And then I was just up there, with the couple, but it was so cold and the wind was relentless. And I'm mere 71 kg. I honestly thought for a second I'm going to get blown away with the wind. And the wind was just relentless and kicking up so much dust that we had to stop and cover ourselves and brace ourselves and put our heads down because it was just relentless for a certain while. And then when we got to the peak of Kalapathar, we got there 45 minutes early. You want to time it in a way where you get there for sunset, but we got there early. So for the first 10 minutes, I was miserable in a corner, sitting down, looking at the ground. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I here? But I quickly collected myself. I'm like, this is a life experience. Like, this is a once in a lifetime experience. Like, enjoy this. Stop being a little bitch. Man up. It's cold, that. So I got up and then I stood in a corner and just waiting for the sunset, just shivering my ass off. But that was the only physical, I guess, turmoil of hardship that I faced, where I questioned why I was doing it. But apart from that, I think, if you're well prepared, you know what to expect, you should be fine.
Nice. Well, Karan, on behalf of myself, I'm pretty damn inspired by you doing that. I thought it was very cool that you didn't make a big deal out of it. You just took it in your stride. I mean, not gonna lie, part of me was thinking this guy's an idiot. This is such a Karan thing to do. It's gonna blow up in his face. He's gonna regret it. But I'm really happy. Also, a big part of me was just, I hope you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a very inspiring thing that you did, and you just did it. And I love that you were documenting the whole journey. I was loving, tuning in every day and seeing what was happening on your Instagram, and it's made me really want to embrace like my love for adventure a bit more as well, and connect with nature more. Like, my last couple of holidays have been like in busy cities and towns, and I think me and my wife, when we went to our last city, we were like, this is going to be our last city holiday that we ever do. Just don't want to be in the busyness anymore.
Yeah.
And I want to be out in the mountains or on some island or doing something just so different from what everyday life is. And I think seeing your videos and your story on your base camp adventure was very inspiring for me. And it's made me want to lean into doing harder physical things outside of the gym as well. And I'm sure if I'm saying that, then I'm sure there's lots of other people that are very inspired by it as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing it while you're going through it, but also for jumping on the podcast.
No, pleasure.
And telling us a bit more about your story.
Thank you. Yeah.
Before we say goodbye, here's one crazy statistic for you. Did you know that almost 40% of people who listen to the show don't actually subscribe to it? Now, I didn't think that was a big deal until I actually learned about the power of hitting subscribe. For you, the listener, you get to stay up to date when we drop episodes on a weekly basis. But for us as a podcast, it really helps our visibility and helps us attract great brands and great listeners to help grow this podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode or you're a big fan of the show, please do us a massive favor and hit subscribe. Thank you so much.